Be careful of who you spoil because after a while, they'll become rotten. Today on rLounge, we hear about a few rotten apples. Some of them don't fall too far from the tree. Entitled child destroys property and threatens to evict my family. For context, my childhood was spent growing up in Dubai in a villa compound, which is basically like a mini-gated community of 16 odd villa homes that each have a private back garden that then converges into a large shared space with a pool, social area, foliage, etc. Now, as a result of this, everyone got to know their neighbors very well due to the shared social space, and as most homes had kids, we'd all play together in the pool. Now there was a particular family with two very entitled children, who we shall call Anna and Francis, not actual names, who must have been around 9. These little turds were well known for causing trouble in the community and generally being extremely entitled. One story that sticks out most to me is the following, which I hope you enjoy. One afternoon, my younger brother runs into our house, having been playing in a group with some other kids, and Anna and Francis, very frustrated. He announces to me that Anna and Francis are currently in our private back garden ripping the heads off of our flowers. I, of course, go outside to find the two gremlins ripping apart plants and kicking our hedges in whilst being supervised by their nanny, who spoke very little English. Me, "What do you think you're doing?" Anna, "F you, we can do what we want." Me, "Stop that and get out of our garden." The nanny just stood there with a vacant expression on her face, so I walk up to her as the kids continue to destroy our garden. "Excuse me, aren't you going to do something?" "No, they do what they want till dinner." "This is our garden. Can you make them leave, please?" This time, no response besides vacant blinking. So naturally, my younger brother and I turn to the gremlins and very firmly tell them, "Stop and get out now," and start to usher them towards the exit. This is when Anna drops some big threats. "My mother owns the whole compound. We own your house, a-hole." They had colorful language for children their age. "She really doesn't. Now get out." "We own your house. We can break anything we want. We can do anything we want. We'll get you kicked out." At this point, we push them out, followed meekly by their nanny, and locked the garden gate. On the other side, they hurl obscenities and eventually run off to find their entitled mother. I'm told by my own mom that she had a heated conversation with the entitled mom, who in fact did not own the compound, not our house, but was very displeased that her children's fun was interrupted by my brother and I. Apparently we have no right to upset or interfere in matters involving her children, and we would do well to keep our business to ourselves or the landlord would be called. Suffice to say, my mom was not having any of it, and asked politely that her children don't invite themselves into our garden and don't destroy our property, which was in fact grounds to involve the landlord. The entitled mom left in a huff, and we didn't hear from them for a couple of weeks, thankfully, but it wouldn't be long before we crossed paths with their BS again. If you enjoyed this one, I have plenty more. Tales from the compound involving entitled parents and kids, as I'm sure you've guessed. Dubai does tend to have some rather entitled people in it, although I did love my time there. Yikes. What the heck? That's so odd that the mom was just okay with them trespassing and damaging property. I feel like the nanny might have known better, but in fear of getting ripped a new one by the mom, she just didn't say anything. So she's really not a nanny at all. These kids are in total control. Update. A few weeks passed since our last unpleasant brush with this family, so we were perhaps a little taken aback to discover a birthday party invitation on our front door one summer morning. It was graciously inviting my sister and my brother to Francis's 10th birthday, to be held in his back garden and in the compound shared social space. Suffice to say, my siblings would have sooner taken an hour-long nap at the bottom of a swimming pool than accept this invitation. So the big day rolls around, and from our back porch, we can see that a massive inflatable bouncy castle was now uncomfortably nestled in the social area between the trees. Bunting and confetti littered the pool area, and no less than 60 children were running wild, screaming with delight. But then a particularly peculiar sight presented itself, a true spectacle. The spectacle in question was entitled mother dressed in an extravagant gown on the upper balcony of her house, calling the children forth to begin to shower them with sweets and candy, like a Mardi Gras queen throwing beads to the public atop a parade float. The children all cheer as a bowl of candy after candy is thrown from above, and by this point, my family and I have seen enough and go inside. The cheers and screams seemed to die down by around 5 that evening. It was clear the party was drawing to a close. So you can imagine my surprise to be disturbed from my Yogscast Tech at Minecraft video by Francis's egregious knocking on my back door. "Can I help you?" "I don't want to talk to you. Where's my sibling's name?" "They're busy right now. How was your birthday party?" "Well, get me my presents then." "Your presents?" "Yes, the one from my brother and the one from my sister." He begins to try and step into my doorway to find his presents, but I stop him. They haven't got you anything, as they didn't go to your party. They were invited, therefore I want my effing presents. Francis screams for his nanny at the top of his lungs, who quickly appears with arms full of his previous gifts. Francis to his nanny, bring me their presents, and then put all of these in my room. She meekly nods and attempts to walk through my doorway too. I once again have to stop her. She doesn't say anything in response to this and simply awkwardly stands there. At this point, I shut the door and wish him a happy birthday, assuming this would be the end of the matter. The next day, my siblings and I were enjoying the swimming pool when the looming shadow of this gremlin interrupted us once again. You owe me presents. We didn't come to your party. Francis to my siblings. I'm going to need my birthday presents and an apology present from each of you. I genuinely couldn't help but laugh at the ridiculousness of this, and it seemed to enrage him further considering the seriousness written across his face. So, of course, it's time to get the queen herself involved, the entitled mother. After rushing off in a huff, Francis returns with her and she seems even less happy to see us than we are to see her. What have you all done to upset my child this time? He's demanding gifts from us that we don't have. Well, why not? Because we don't. It's his birthday. I'm aware. She starts to speak slower and more enunciated as if I'm the slow one and not quite getting the obvious. On a birthday, you give presents. We understand how birthdays work. Good, then you should understand why my baby is upset. She proceeds to stand there with her hands on her hips expectingly, as if we were meant to get out of the pool and present her son with gifts that second. We of course did no such thing and continued with our swimming session, leaving her there on the edge of the pool, red-faced and irked. Same as last time, I hope you enjoyed another Tale from the Compound, and if you'd like to hear more, please let me know. And if you haven't already, please read my first post for more context. This seems absolutely ridiculous. Where do these people even come from to think that they can behave this way? Where were your parents during all of this? Update. Entitled child punches my head, shoots paintballs into my property, whilst entitled father tells me off and revs his Ferrari at 5 a.m. Hello again, and welcome back to Tales from the Compound. The support you guys are giving in this series is phenomenal, and I love being able to share with you some of my stories of the entitled people I grew up with. If you haven't already, please see my first post for context as to what the compound is, and who some of the main entitled people I write about are. Original post. Today I'm not going to be talking about Anna, Francis, and their entitled mother. Instead, it's time to talk about another family, my next door neighbors. More specifically, an entitled father and his 10-year-old son, who we'll call Simon. I honestly chose not to interact with my neighbors as little as possible, so this post is more a collection of mini stories to them that I've compiled to paint you guys a full picture of their entitledness. I grew up next to a mosque, and some might find the muezzin singing a call to prayer every morning and every night through a loudspeaker to be bothersome or disturbing to their sleep pattern. I, however, quite enjoyed listening to it, but what I didn't enjoy listening to was my neighbor. Entitled father revving his black Ferrari's engine, first thing in the morning and last thing before night. Entitled father rarely drove his gorgeous black Ferrari, but in order to keep the engine turning over and stop sand getting inside it. Every day and night, without fail, he'd rev the engine as loud as he could for 10 minutes with a fat cigar hanging from his mouth. He would also have a very young, assumably very poor teenager cycle over every single evening and clean the car from top to bottom over the course of an hour, even when entitled father was away on business. Entitled father would also have his maids and nannies set up his entire back garden social area with pillows, candles, trays of cigars, and flowers before it was even light outside, and we quite literally never saw him use it. But one person we did see use that back garden was Simon, because Simon had a paintball gun, and Simon loved to fire off rounds into other people's property, and Simon loved to make his nannies clean up the paintball mess in his own garden as he cackled maniacally. But the paintballs aren't the worst memory we have of Simon. On his 9th birthday, Simon had a WWE party to which I was invited, and this kid was truly a fanatic. His bouncy castle was WWE themed, the decorations and cake all depicted John Cena and The Undertaker, and his WWE toys littered his garden. About 40 kids were in attendance. The parents smoked and drank, whilst the nannies and maids catered for the children. I only popped round for the cake, as my own parents suggested it'd be polite, and they knew I'd rather smell what the rock's cooking than spend longer than 10 minutes with Simon. I sort of got my wish, because no sooner than I'd arrived, I was invited to enter the bouncy house for a WWE wrestling match with the birthday boy. He'd beaten every other boy at this party and was keen for a new challenger, and since I was a year older than him, he was certain my defeat would win him the belt. So I entered the ring, hoping there'd be some cake for me at the end of it. This was when I discovered that Simon had no idea what wrestling was, as he ran at me and began to punch my head with the ferocity of a feral raccoon. Punch after punch, kick after kick, connected with my head and groin for all of 5 seconds before I pushed him off, and he stumbled back and tripped over his own feet on the uneven bouncy surface. This resulted in him bashing his glasses and face on the floor, and into his nose, eye area where it looked like it was bruising. Of course, he burst into tears and ran to entitled father, who he told I'd punched him in the face and tried to kick in his glasses while he was down, when he was simply bouncing on the bouncy castle. I was rightfully so berated by entitled father for my violent tendencies and the fact I'd ruined his son's birthday and possibly his face, and that I should leave at once, without a cake. Considering my own parents weren't present, I didn't know any of the kids there, and I'd been at the party for maybe 2 minutes tops. I saw no point in debating and welcomed the opportunity to return to my home for some Minecraft. Thanks for sticking around for another longer Tales from the Compound. Hope you enjoyed hearing about some different characters, and as always, let me know if you want to hear more. I'm sitting on one story in particular, a story that I think knocks all the others out of the park, but I don't know if y'all are ready for that yet. Where's the adult supervision while all of this is happening? Update. Now for my brother's 8th birthday party. He had decided upon a DC Comics superhero theme, but not just that. He wanted a sort of Contest of Champions collection of DC-inspired party games for him and his friends, with rankings and winners decided at the end of the day with prizes, etc. Frankly, I think my family and I did a great job designing the party games and decorating the house, and it would be an understatement to say we were confident that the party was going to blow these kids' minds. Around 11 a.m., my brother's friends began to arrive, and soon we had 20 hyper 8-year-olds on our hands. However, we were still waiting on a friend who lived in the compound to show. Luckily, he knocked on our back door that moment, and I went to open it to find the friend, his 6-year-old brother, Jake, and their mum waiting for me. She ushered the two of them inside quickly, said everything looked great, thanked me, and darted off. There was only one problem, however. Jake was not invited to this party, and this was for good reason. Jake's brother was nice. His mother was delightful, if not a bit entitled for dropping him off without asking. But he, however, was not so delightful. Spoiled, entitled, and still expected to be babied at 6 years old. This was not part of the plan. Jake's older brother went to join the rest of the boys, ready for the championship to begin, and Jake just stood there before turning to my mom and uttering one word. Chips. My mom simply said to him, "Don't worry, we'll be doing lunch after the games. Plenty of chips for you then." Jake just blinked back up at her before walking past her into our kitchen and beginning to go through our cupboards. My mom, somewhat in shock, exchanged bewildered glances with me before following him into the kitchen and lightly escorting him out of there to the rest of the boys. Great start. The time had come for the Contest of Champions to begin, and the boys enjoyed a round after round of dopey party games with light DC theming. Example, soft archery target practice named Green Arrow Assault, throwing rope hoops named Wonder Woman's Lasso Toss. You get the gist. It wouldn't be long, however, until we'd encountered our next Jake-related problem. During Superman's strength test, arm wrestling, the second my brother's hand touched his, he broke down into a temper tantrum insisting my brother had broken his arm. To help calm him and keep the rest of the games moving smoothly, my mom gave him a mini bag of Haribo sweets. This set a dreadful precedent, however. From this point onwards, each game, Jake expected a packet of sweets whether he won or not, and should he not receive said sweets, would somehow stage an injury or someone bullying him to ensure he could be calmed with some sugary sustenance. The final game of the day was a mini-tournament of Injustice: Gods Among Us on the PS3, a DC-themed fighting video game in the style of Mortal Kombat, but much less violent. Despite me explaining clearly to the kids how to play and allowing practice rounds, when it came to the match of the century, Jake versus some other kid, Jake began to cry almost instantly when famed fighter some other kid landed first blow, thus resulting in Jake smashing my controller onto the ground, breaking it and ending the final challenge prematurely for the other kids before running off into tears, having ruined the final game. Somberly, I led the kids back to the dining room, mourning the loss of my controller, so that we could count up everyone's scores and name the champions. My mom noticed Jake's absence and minutes later found Jake in our kitchen cupboard having found a sharing bag of Doritos, on which he'd chosen to gorge himself. Naturally, when it came to counting up the scores, it would come as no surprise to anyone that Jake was last. The top 3 kids each received a Batman action figure, which, I can't lie, were pretty dang cool, and every other kid got a Lego minifig blind bag packet to enjoy. Suffice to say, Jake was most displeased by his feeble participation award and attempted to steal one of the Batman figures from the prize table. My mom told him calmly that those weren't for him and helped him open his Lego minifigure pack, which, of course, contained a figure that he took a particular offense to. Not wanting another tantrum, I offered to trade him one of my figures from my room, as I was an avid Lego collector at the time and had hundreds of the little fellas that I was sure at least one of could temper his rage. It didn't take a psychic to guess that Jake would select one of my favorite and most valuable figures, a large-scale Lego Smaug the Dragon from The Hobbit, as his trade. I explained to him I wouldn't be trading that, and he could pick from a selection I'd curate for him, to which he reluctantly agreed. He eventually decided upon a stormtrooper, and I thought that would be the end of it. If you'd been paying attention to these stories, you'd know I'm wrong often. Hastily, I led Jake back downstairs so I could help Mum with getting the kids to the right parents, hand out party bags, etc. Of course, the sneaky gremlin took his chance to slink away once again, and so once all the kids had left, a search party was deployed to locate my favorite person. No prizes for guessing where he was. Jake was in my room, stuffing his pockets full of as many figures as he could, and when I opened the door, he was caught in the act of hiding Smaug under his shirt. As calmly as I possibly could, I told him to empty his pockets and return my Lego to me. He screamed I was a mean liar and that I was robbing him, and began to scream and jump up and down on the spot until my mom came in. She told him that his mother was here to pick him up, and that he needed to return my Lego to me. In response, he emptied it all out onto the floor, before wiping his tears and running to his mother and uttering just one word, "Chips!" His mother told him she'd go get him some now and thanked my mom and I for looking after her angels all day. I'd never been so happy to see someone leave in all my life. Thanks for taking the time to read all of that. I did pre-warn it would be the longest one I'll write, but it's also easily my favorite one I've told. Really appreciate everyone who's turned in for each of these stories thus far, and I hope you've enjoyed spending some time with Jake. As always, if you want to hear more, please let me know below. Now some community responses. McFlame13 says, I'm wondering why you or your mother did not call Jake's mom to pick him up, or there would be consequences. He wasn't invited, and even though everyone ignored that fact, he still was a massive menace. I would have found ways to teach him what he was doing is wrong. VOP replies, that's the problem with our mums being such good friends at the time. We didn't want to make a stink, because Jake's mum was genuinely delightful, just he wasn't. You Good Drace You says, I don't know how old you were back then, but congrats on staying calm and collected through all of this. I know I wouldn't have been able to. VOP replies, I must have been 11 or 12, I think. I think growing up around these types of people meant I was used to trying to find ways to deal with it. Yikes. I'm a little shocked that there's children out there that really behave this way, and the parents just let them get away with whatever, or even enable the behavior. That's horrific. Were there any other children around you that didn't behave this way? I sort of feel bad for kids like that, as they always end up knocked on their butts later in life as they're totally unprepared for what life throws at them since they've never been told no. At some point, the crown falls off and reality hits. Do you have similar stories? What do you make of this behavior? And thank you for joining us today on rLounge. Before you go, be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. If you have something you want to say regarding today's content, share that with us in the comments below. See you next time.